Headlines are dominated by President Trump's trade framework with Japan, which lowers reciprocal tariffs on Japanese goods to 15% and includes a $550 billion Japanese investment package in the United States. As part of the deal announced July 23, Tokyo has agreed to cut tariffs on U.S. auto imports from 25% to 15%, while the U.S. will defer imposing higher levies on Japanese products originally slated for August 1st. At the same time, the Wall Street Journal reports that Attorney General Pam Bondi informed President Trump in May that his name appears multiple times in Justice Department files related to Jeffrey Epstein, mentions characterized as unverified hearsay and dismissed by the White House as fake news. Meanwhile, on the other side of the border, Ottawa's pursuit of its own U.S. trade agreement has been met with both cautious optimism and, honestly, increasingly strident rhetoric. Prime Minister Carney has publicly declared that the era of close economic integration and security cooperation with the United States has ended, and that Canada must dramatically reduce its dependence on the United States. In contrast to the federal government's measured rhetoric, Canadian premiers have adopted a much firmer stance on U.S. policy, and even hinting at ties with China instead of the U.S. The most widely covered incident was British Columbia Premier David Eby's public spat with the United States administration. On July 21st, U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra complained that, quote, "There are reasons why the president and some of his team refer to Canada as being mean and nasty to deal with, blaming Canadians' reluctance to travel south and their bans on American alcohol. Keep it up, keep buying Canadian, keep your vacations Canadian," he challenged, adding that if defending Canada's economy, jobs, and sovereignty earns the label mean and nasty, most Canadians would be proud of that. In his latest remarks, the Ontario Premier directly addressed the U.S. President. Ontario Premier Doug Ford distilled Canada's growing impatience with the United States under President Donald Trump into one blunt admission: "I don't trust President Trump as far as I can throw him. He constantly changes his mind. You just don't know who you're dealing with." Ford pointed out that while Japan invested $550 billion in a new United States deal, last time I checked, Japan buys about $79 billion of U.S. products. We buy about $349 billion, making Canada America's largest customer by far. Yet, under Trump's sweeping steel and aluminum tariffs, Ford insisted, "We're not going to take a back seat to anyone," and he and his fellow premiers left the meeting more unified than ever in their determination to diversify our markets and build pipelines so we aren't beholden to the U.S. Ford described a vision of Canadian economic resilience that runs from coast to coast. Whether it's oil, our small modular reactors, or critical minerals, we need to make sure we can get our products around the world. When pressed on raising Canada's own counter-tariffs on U.S. steel and aluminum to 50%, he replied, "First, we have to stop cheap steel products relabeled from China, made in Pakistan or Turkey, undercutting our hard-working steelworkers. Until Ottawa clamps down on those proxy shipments, matching Trump's levy makes no sense." His comments underscored a broader strategy of targeting immediate sectoral solutions, autos, timber, copper, rather than waiting indefinitely for a full free trade agreement overhaul. Ford also offered a more nuanced stance toward China, invoking Churchill's dictum that the enemy of our enemy is our friend. While he quipped that Trump was acting like the enemy, he noted Ontario's two-way trade with China tops $43 billion annually. Ford said, "As long as China plays fair and doesn't undercut our markets, I have no problem dealing with them, but I've got to protect our EV sector, so no lifting of the 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles." In barely a few minutes of unscripted remarks, Ford crystallized Canada's dual imperative to stand firm against U.S. volatility while forging broader global partnerships that will keep Canadian workers, and the Canadian economy, competitive in these uncertain times. Further to those comments, yesterday, Canada's premiers shared their final insights on U.S. trade and tariffs. Let's take a closer look at what they had to say. Over 3 intense days in Huntsville, Ontario, Canada's premiers gathered under the banner of Team Canada to tackle a daunting agenda, chief among it the escalating trade conflict with the United States under President Donald Trump. From the very first session with Prime Minister Carney, there was a palpable sense that the old give-and-take of continental trade was being upended by unilateral actions south of the border, and the provincial leaders channeled that urgency into a remarkably united front. Ontario Premier Doug Ford set the tone in his opening remarks, reminding everyone of the sheer scale of Canada's trade relationship with the United States. He said, "We buy more products off the US than Japan, Korea, China, Mexico, and the UK combined. We're the US's #1 customer, yet under Donald Trump's tariffs, we sure as heck don't have to take a back seat to him." He vowed to hold Ottawa to account and insisted that provinces would not sit idly by. "We talked about standing up for workers in the face of President Trump's tariffs. With the United Team Canada approach, we're going to build and protect the true North, strong and free." Alberta Premier Danielle Smith acknowledged that a complete overhaul of the Canada-United States Free Trade Agreement might now be delayed until next year, but she insisted Canada could still carve out immediate wins. She said, "What we're hearing from the Americans, it looks like they're putting off a full renegotiation of the Canada-United States Free Trade Agreement until next year. I find that disappointing. If we can come up with some kind of common arrangement on those sectoral issues, autos, steel, aluminum, timber, copper, by August 1st, we'll look at that as a win." Smith urged fellow premiers to press Ottawa for swift targeted deals on the hardest-hit industries rather than waiting for a grand bargain. British Columbia Premier David Eby struck a more frustrated note, lamenting that north of $50 billion worth of shovel-ready projects in our province remain stalled without federal support. Yet he too stressed unity, saying, "Let's get working on what we can do to build this country and build our economy," and pledging that British Columbia would be ready to discuss pipelines or other cross-border infrastructure once Alberta and the Prime Minister are in position with a proponent. Eby also reaffirmed British Columbia's willingness to partner on wider economic integration, including electricity interties and liquefied natural gas expansions, so as to demonstrate we've listened to all regions. New Brunswick Premier Blaine Higgs noted that Trump's threats had in fact driven the premiers to meet more often. He said, "The pressing threats that Donald Trump has made to our economy have meant that, rather than squeezing out conversations about bail reform and immigration, we've been meeting a lot more." He underscored that, even under the weight of tariff battles, provinces continued to push forward on healthcare, immigration reform, and internal trade initiatives. Spurred in part by fears of United States protectionism, the premiers also accelerated talks on Canada's own internal trade barriers. Ford highlighted Ontario's repeal of remaining obstacles so that, and I quote, "wine or any other good can flow coast to coast without added burden, pause or cost." Quebec Premier François Legault, speaking in French, confirmed that Quebec will table, and as a majority government, adopt legislation this fall to remove interprovincial trade barriers, bringing his province into the fold. Higgs noted that New Brunswick has already eliminated the personal exemption on alcohol imports from other provinces and introduced direct-to-consumer sales. Together, they aim to boost Canadian GDP by an estimated $200 billion and increase it 5 to 6% by year's end. Despite occasional frustrations with Ottawa's pace, every premier returned to the theme of solidarity against external pressures. Doug Ford concluded, "United we stand, divided we fall," invoking both the Canadian motto and the collective resolve required to push back against one person, and that's Donald Trump down there. As the incoming chair of the Council of the Federation, Prince Edward Island's Premier Rob Lance pledged to carry forward this spirit of cooperation. Rob Lance stated, "Prince Edward Island has a history of playing an outsized role in the Federation. We'll nurture that sense of collaboration as we seek to build nation-building projects and protect our economic sovereignty." Thank you for watching. As an independent channel, we don't have corporate backing. We rely on your support to keep going. If you found this video valuable, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps more people find our work. Thank you so much for being part of our community. Check out the next video on your screen. We picked it just for you.